In this video, I will show you how you can always get the canter lead you ask for. You will see how I prepare my horse for the transitions to canter, in trot and in walk. Next, I'm going to show you how I work with a horse that tends to be too fast or too slow. Maybe you're thinking that learning how to ask for canter leads is just too difficult for you right now, and it doesn't have to be easy to get your horse to always enter the canter lead you ask for. It's true, but trust me, you should learn this, and the reason is quite simple. If you'll be riding on your horse always in the same canter lead, for example always in right lead canter, your horse might get health issues and back pain. Your horse uses different muscles in right lead canter and different muscles in left lead canter. Canter is not like walk or trot, where your horse uses his muscles evenly. In canter, it's always more demanding on one side of your horse, depending on the canter lead. If you ride only in left lead canter, for example, your horse will be exercising one side of his body more than the other, and that can lead to health issues such as back pain, or your horse can even start limping. So now, let's take a look at what your horse needs to know before you ask him to switch to canter, and before you ask for left or right lead canter. There are a few steps that will make everything much easier. What your horse needs to be capable of before you ask for canter is moving his back to the side when you press him with one of your legs, exactly as you can see it in a slow motion. When he does that, you can ask for the canter lead you want. Well, why should your horse be moving his back to the side? If you want to enter, for example, a right lead canter, and in the moment that you ask for the transition, your horse's back is moved to the right, it's going to be natural for him to switch to the right lead canter. And it's going to be difficult for him to enter the left lead canter. This way you make it easier for your horse to enter the canter lead that you want, and you make it more difficult for him to enter the canter lead that you do not want. Now you can see how my horse turns around his front legs, which is the first step towards controlling the back of your horse while riding. Now I want my horse to go away from the pressure that I create with my leg and move his rear to the side. Moving to the side with your horse's front or rear legs is not something difficult for him. I'm sure your horse already does it quite often while you clean him. And in that situation, I'm sure that you don't perceive it as something that could be difficult. And it certainly doesn't get more difficult once you are in a saddle. It's just necessary for your horse to understand what are you asking. So let's take a look at how I ask for it. I use my rein to prevent my horse from going forward, and I ask him to move his back to the side by moving my right leg backwards and pressing my horse. It's very similar to working from the ground and pushing your horse with your arms to move his back. As soon as your horse starts moving, it's important to release or at least lower the pressure you are creating with your leg, to reward him for doing what you asked. However, if your horse doesn't react, keep increasing the pressure until he reacts and starts moving. Then, as soon as he does, release the pressure. When necessary, you can even help yourself using a spur or a whip. If you know your horse can already do this, it's important to be consistent and make sure he does it when you ask for it. Now, let's take a look at another way in which you can teach your horse to move his back to the side. I use this mainly with horses that tend to speed up based on the pressure of my leg instead of just moving to the side. When your horse faces a wall like this, he knows that he just can't go forward, so you don't really have to brake him pulling the reins. You can see that now my horse doesn't have many other things he could do other than what I ask. That makes it easier for him to understand what I'm asking when I move my leg backwards and press him. By releasing the pressure as soon as my horse does what I asked, I reward him and give him motivation to listen to me the next time around as well. Also, lowering the pressure as soon as your horse does what you're asking helps with teaching him to react on lower and lower amounts of pressure. Turning around your horse's front legs is not good just for improving canter transitions, but it also gives you better control over where your horse goes in general. You control your horse by simply creating pressure in various spots. If you teach him to not just react on the pressure from the bit when you pull your reins, but also on the pressure that comes from a single side, your horse is going to start understanding you much more, and your communication with him is going to become much easier. As soon as my horse can turn around his front legs, I move to the second step. Basically, I start practicing the same thing in walk. I put my horse in exactly the position that he should be in right before switching to canter. If your horse's back is moved to the right in the moment when you ask him to switch to canter, he is almost certainly going to switch to right lead canter. And of course, if your horse's back is going to be moved to the left, he will be very likely to switch to the left lead canter. You can see the position that I want my horse to get in the video. You can also see the way I use my leg to create the pressure. Every riding session I spend a few minutes practicing turning around my horse's front legs. This exercise is not here just for preparing my horse for transitions to canter. It also exercises his neck and back muscles and teaches him to react well on my pressure, but that's not a topic of this video. The third step is that as soon as my horse can move his back to the side in walk, I start practicing it in trot as well. However, because in trot it becomes more difficult for your horse, initially I just want him to move his rear to the side without really bending his back and neck, which is something that I was doing in walk. You can see the way this should be done in a video. When your horse learns this, which actually shouldn't take too long, I can move on to the last step that's right before asking for the actual canter transition, which is, as you can see, moving your horse's rear to the side while also bending his back and neck. In order for your horse to be able to switch to canter properly, he needs to strengthen and relax his back and neck muscles, and that's especially important for the standstill to canter transition. Strengthening your horse's back muscles is also something that this exercise helps with. It helps you to make sure your horse understands what you want when you ask for a certain canter lead, and it also helps him to get ready for the canter transitions physically. The way I ask my horse to do this is the same way that I did it in walk. Maybe you feel that it's an awful lot of exercises just so you can do a very simple thing, which is to switch to canter. However, the point of this video is to show you how to make sure that your horse always switches to canter nicely and to the canter lead you ask for. When you went to the first grade in school and you were learning how to write individual letters, then simple words and then sentences and so on, do you think that if you skipped the beginning and you just wanted to write sentences right from the beginning, things would be easier if you would end up writing better and quicker? You wouldn't, right? And it's the same thing with training your horse. You can achieve the best results the fastest if you know all the steps and just take it one step at a time. In this video I'm showing you all the necessary steps that you need to take before asking your horse to switch to canter. When you manage to do the first step, the next one is never going to be too difficult for you, and like this you can move and progress very quickly. I always start practicing the transition to canter from trot first. So what's the most important thing with it? I try to get my horse to not speed up in trot before switching to canter. And while in canter, I want my horse to be calm and relaxed. And of course, I want my horse to switch to the canter lead that I actually asked for. If my horse switches to canter well, considering his current abilities, I let him be in canter for around 50 meters and then I slowly slow down to walk and reward him. If my horse enters the wrong lead canter, I simply stop him by pulling my reins and I ask to switch to canter again. Now you can see in slow motion that my horse switched to the right lead canter when I moved his back to the right side before asking for canter. When I ask for the left lead canter, of course it still works with the same principle, and all I need to do is to move my horse's back to the left right before asking for canter. When you practice transitions to canter, it's good to avoid doing it over and over again too often for too long. Teach your horse new things only when he's calm and relaxed. You can always achieve better results when you just do 3 but well executed canter transitions per day, other than if you do 10 but average ones. But now let's talk about the walk to canter transition. I start practicing the transition from walk straight to canter only when my horse doesn't speed up before the transition from trot to canter. And also only when he's already calm while switching to the canter lead that I ask for. As you can see in slow motion, I use my left leg to move the back of my horse to the right, and then by gently pressing him with both legs, I ask him to switch to canter. In the beginning, I don't mind when my horse does 1 or 2 trot steps before switching to canter, but over time I want him to switch from calm walk straight to canter. I also want my horse to switch to canter in the moment when he's moving his back to the side, because then he will almost certainly enter the canter lead that I want from him. When my horse can switch from walk straight to canter, I start practicing asking for canter from standstill. In the beginning, I again don't mind if my horse does 1 or 2 trot steps before entering canter. What's new now, however, is that I can no longer be moving his back to the side before asking for the transition. However, at this point my horse should be already comfortable with the transition to canter, so I no longer have to move his back to the side to really make sure that he enters the canter lead I want. All I do just before asking my horse to switch to canter is that I lightly press my outer leg without moving my horse's back to the side. By doing that, I basically tell my horse which canter lead I want, and then I ask him to switch to canter by squeezing him with my both legs. Another thing with asking for canter from standstill is that my horse should be relaxed and calm enough for me to do only a few canter steps after a correct switch to canter. Now, while you are watching me teach my horse to transition from standstill to canter, I will tell you what I do when my horse switches to canter that is a bit too fast, which is something that actually happens quite often, especially in the beginning. In this case, I ask for canter standing around 15 meters in front of a wall or some kind of barrier, and after the transition to canter, I immediately start turning to avoid hitting it. If your horse has a wall in front of himself just before switching to canter, he's not going to enter a canter that is too fast, and I'm not going to have to slow him down by pulling my reins. This way, your horse learns to always switch to relaxed canter. But maybe you have the opposite issue and your horse tends to be too slow. I use a whip or spur to increase the intensity and tell my horse that I want him to move faster. In these cases, I don't really mind if my horse's reaction is going to be a bit exaggerated after the use of a whip or spurs. This way, it shows my horse that it's always better for him to just react on a small pressure, because if he does, he won't have to deal with the whip or the spurs. I start using the whip or spurs only after my horse reacted badly when I asked him the first time. This way, I basically teach him that it's his choice whether I'm going to use the whip and the spurs or not. In the end, we can do a quick recap of the most important things you learned in this video. Canter leads are very important for your horse's health, and especially his back. If you ride only in left lead or only in right lead canter all the time and you are not able to ask for both, your horse will most likely get back pain and can even start limping. So let's take a look at the steps in which you can make sure your horse always switches to the canter lead you ask for. In the first step, I teach my horse to move his back away from the pressure of my single leg. That is why I practice turning around my horse's front legs in the beginning. After that, in the second step, I start practicing moving the back of my horse to the side in walk. As soon as my horse can do it in walk, I move on to the third step and I start practicing it in trot. When I can move the back of my horse to the side in trot, I can already start practicing trot to canter transitions. Then, as soon as my horse transitions from trot to canter well, I move on to the transition from walk to canter. Then, when my horse reliably transitions to correct lead canter even without me moving his back to the side, I move on to entering canter from standstill. If you follow these steps, it's never going to be too difficult to move on to the next step. And if you do them all, you can learn to ask your horse for canter from standstill, while always getting the canter lead you want. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to see you in the next video that I'll be sending to you in just a few days from now. But until then, you can go ahead and leave me a comment to let me know how you liked the video. Also share it with your friends and let them know. It wouldn't be possible to make these videos without your support.